My name's Daniel Davies. I'm Vice Chair of Trustees at the Welsh Centre of International Affairs, which is based here at the Temple of Peace. Well, look, the body of trustees is there to oversee the strategy and the activities of the organisation, to make sure that it's in line with the organisation's aims and objectives. As vice chair, I support the chair in leading that group of trustees in their work.
Your great grandfather growing up, what did you know about him?
Well, I probably didn't know very much about him. I think it's been a gradual process of getting to know him throughout my life. I knew that I knew very much about his grandfather more. Because where I grew up in Llandinum, there's a statue of, that's my great-great-great-grandfather, standing next to the bridge over the River Severn, which was one of the first things that he did as a contractor and as an engineer. And he then went on to make a fortune in railway construction, and then subsequently in the mining in South Wales, and then finally in Barry Docks. So that's where, and there's no link there, because that's the sort of the money that then passed down to the first Lord Davies, my great-grandfather, and which is the money that then he put into this building and various other things that he was passionate about. So that's probably the route in for me into understanding who he was. And
what were you told about the building? What were you told about the Temple of Peace growing up?
Well, I grew up in mid Wales, which seems a long way from Cardiff, and it's only really since I moved to Cardiff in 2009 that I've got to know Cardiff, got to know the building, the Temple of Peace, since I got involved really with the Welsh Centre for International Affairs. But I knew that there was a sort of a legacy from my great-grandfather of the work and interest he did in the areas of health and in international relations, which are both things that I have been somewhat involved in during my career. So it's evolved, I think, my understanding and my knowledge of this area of his life through my own life and career, which has been a nice way of getting to know about it. Yes, I studied international relations, which as an academic discipline is something that First Lord Davies really established as a discipline when he set up the first chair of international relations at Aberystwyth University, and the Department for International Politics still has a very strong reputation for international relations today.
And this was before your great-grandfather? This was your great-grandfather?
This is my great-grandfather who one of the things that he did was he set up this chair of international relations. So that between the wars, this is when the study of international relations as a discipline really came to life and spread. So that was very interesting to study it myself, obviously a lot later. And I've worked in Geneva for many years. Before I moved to Cardiff, I lived in Geneva and worked in some international organisations there. Initially more to do with economics, which is my own field, but then subsequently in international disease control at the World Health Organization and the Global Fund. So there's a link there from international relations to peace and health, obviously, which is the two big ideals that sit behind this building.
And how old were you when you first visited the Temple of Peace?
I think I came here to a couple of talks and lectures when I was at school. So sitting in the marble hall, listening to, I can't remember what the subject was, and there's a bust of my great grandfather sort of sitting behind me, but I can't say I was very aware, I think, of the contribution that he'd made and the sort of the key role that he'd made in establishing this building at that time. It was obviously a very quite awe-inspiring space to be in, and a very impressive building to visit as a young man.
And what made you want to become a trustee then?
Well,
Or how
yes.
did that come about? Were you invited? What was the process?
I'd been in touch with the then director of the Welsh Centre for International Affairs because it was just an area that I was interested in personally, and I was just interested to explore the family background, the links there. So when I moved to Cardiff, I said that I was coming, and I was asked if I would join the trustees at that time. And it was a very nice way for me, moving from Geneva, which is a very international city, to Cardiff, which is a capital city for Wales, but has a more sort of local focus. That I could sustain those international links and interests through being involved with the Welsh Centre for International Affairs.
And do you have a favourite part of the building when you come here? Do you have a favourite room or a favourite place? Or?
Well, I really like this room that we're sitting in
So
now.
where are we now? Explain that.
We're in the council chamber, which I think was where the Welsh National Council of the League of Nations Union, which is one of the organisations my great grandfather was a sort of driving force behind. They would meet here in this building, in this part of the building, and it has the feel of a library. We're surrounded by books, many of which were his own collection of books. And here and in other rooms, meeting rooms around the building, you find old maps that date back to the 30s and 40s, which are very outdated, but they're really interesting historical documents, and they show you the world as it was at the time when this building was founded. So there's a bit of history in this room and throughout the building that I find very interesting. The Marble Hall is a very impressive place to be in, and I think it's unique in Cardiff, and I can't think of anywhere else that has such an imposing space and architecture and design to it. When I come in, I know it as a place where all sorts of things happen in there, and I come in and out to meetings here. Sometimes there are exams going on in there. Sometimes there's filming going on in there. Sometimes there are weddings and parties even that are going in there. But the original purpose, I think, as a meeting place for lectures and for exchange of ideas and debate on issues of public importance, it also is still going on. That's the core purpose of that space, and we still use it for that today. And I love to go to events there, and the acoustics there are very unusual. They're great for listening to people sharing their ideas about important issues.
And have you got any examples of VIPs or people who've been here and spoken that have sort of inspired you over the years?
Well, there've been very, very many. We have an annual lecture, particularly here, that's had some very interesting people. We had a visit from Desmond Tutu, who spoke here a couple of years ago. He was a very inspiring person, a very inspiring speaker. So I think those lectures and that unique space we have allows us to attract to Wales and to Cardiff speakers that perhaps otherwise wouldn't come here, and I think it leaves them with a very strong impression of Wales and of Wales's aspirations to have a role in the world.
And what is it about the temple that would attract someone like Desmond Tutu? Why would he want to come and talk here?
Well, I think it's just the name in itself, a temple of peace and health. It immediately attracts interest, and it's not often that you would get an invitation to something like that. And I think when people look behind that name and see what it's about, it's not a religious building, it's a civic building, but it's founded upon important humanitarian ideals. I think that in itself has an appeal for people to come and find out more about it. And I'm sure when they get here, arrive and see the stunning architecture and the sort of confidence of the building, I think it's a different experience to going to any other conferences or places where people might be asked to speak. So I think it does have a sort of unique selling point for sort of VIPs and people of note. Well, I think it's tinged with some regret. I mean, it was opened in 1938. It was only a year before the Second World War broke out. So it's a reminder of the idealism and that took hold between the wars, particularly for those who had fought in the First World War. And it was here, one of the purposes of it was as a memorial to those who had fought and died in the First World War. And the fact that only a year later the Second World War would start, and personally for my great-grandfather, his own son would die in the course of that war, only 6 months after he himself died from natural causes. So it's all the more. I suppose that only serves to underline the importance of this as a symbol of those ideals that it was set up to commemorate.
So this year, as you know, is the 80th anniversary of the Temple of Peace.
Yes.
Do you think the building and the work that goes on here is still as relevant today as it was 80 years ago?
Yes, I do, and it's nice to know that the anniversary is coming up, and it'll be an opportunity to make more people aware of what this building stands for. And I think those ideals are just as relevant today. The kind of things that my great-grandfather wanted to promote, the importance of nations working together to solve global problems, particularly problems of conflict between countries, is of course still very, very important today. The fight against disease, which was part of the founding ideals of the building as well, also very important today. Less so in this country for tuberculosis, which was the focus of his work, but the fight against tuberculosis goes on, around the world. So it's a reminder of that as well, I think. So I do hope that the anniversary will provide an opportunity to make those messages more known to the people of Cardiff and Wales and beyond.
And why is it important to you to carry on the legacy of your great-grandfather?
I think it's important that the work that he does is remembered. It's a link back to an earlier time that's it's all too easily forgotten, but it's actually not that long ago. I think it's very important that we don't forget what was the driving force behind the peace movements and the health movements, particularly between the wars, and that we should never feel complacent about those risks. So it's a way of reminding us all, I think, that we need to keep our attention on those issues. The idea of the Welsh Centre for International Affairs is to encourage and enable people, particularly young people in Wales, to take an active interest in international and the links between our health and well-being here in Wales and that of the broader global community, and to give them some of the tools and the knowledge that they need and support that they need to not just understand those issues, but actually make a contribution themselves as global citizens. So that is one of the nice ways in which that legacy is being pursued still today at the temple.
And your great-grandfather, if he was watching now or walking around the building, what do you think he would think about the way the temple has developed over the last 80 years?
Well, I think he'd be a very energetic presence in the building if he was here today. We are working on the transition to a new owner of the building as well, So I'm sure he'd be very interested in how the legacy of the temple is going to be carried forward, through Cardiff University, who are now the owners of the building here. And no doubt he would be making sure that the building is used for the purposes that he originally intended. We're a small charity, and like any charity, financial sustainability is the number one priority, to make sure that we have the resources to survive as an organisation. We have a small legacy from the time when the organisation was set up that is very helpful. But what's been great during the time that I've been involved is I think we've really modernised the organisation. We've brought in a lot of new trustees, particularly younger trustees, those who are active in their careers in all sorts of different fields, and making sure that we're an organisation that's really relevant to today's Wales and young people in Wales. So there's been a lot of transformation and change that's happened in the organisation, but I think we're really confident that the organisation has a bright future.
Brilliant. Anything else you'd like to say on this 80th? And what would you like to say to the temple on its 80th birthday?
I would just hope that it would have many years ahead of carrying forward the messages of peace and health which are in its title, and that it will be recognised for the unique place that it has in Welsh public life.